This podcast is brought to you by WRFL, Radio Free Lexington. Find us online at wrfl.fm. Catch us on your FM radio while you're in Central Kentucky at 88.1 FM all the way to the left. Thank you for listening, and please be sure to subscribe.
Hi, and welcome to From the Woods, Kentucky. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Lhotka. Today in studio, we have Billy Thomas, and Billy is an extension forester in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources at the University of Kentucky. Good to have you.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
So today we're going to start talking about the Woodland Stewards Webinar series and the next steps. We had one of these last year, and so now we're kind of talking about the next steps and what you do. But before we start that, we know you've been on the show a couple of times. Just for the people who haven't listened before, tell us what you do at UK.
Sure. Well, my job's a little unique, really, for the university. We have this group called Extension at the university, and our job is really to kind of extend the university to the people across the state. The knowledge that we gain here at the university and other universities, we try to put it and package it in ways that people can use it on their own property. So I do that for forestry-related topics here in the state of Kentucky, and I work with a lot of great people, but my job is really to try to educate woodland owners on how they can go about caring for their property, who they can connect with to kind of get the most out of their property, and really just to help them become good woodland stewards.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about this new webinar series coming up.
So we're really excited about this series. It starts on February 6th, and it's going to go for 5 consecutive Thursday evenings, and it runs from 7 to 8:30 Eastern Time. And we've got almost 30 county extension offices that are hosting one or more of the webinars. Now, the thing about this series is you can only watch the live ones at one of the participating hosting county extension offices. And that really came down to we only had so many licensed seats that we could kind of share, so we had to kind of control it that way. So if you want to see these live, you'll have to go to a participating county extension office. And you can find that list on our website at ukforestry.org. We'll have a link there at the top of the page that you'll be able to see which sites are hosting. But this series is covering, it's really the next step. Like you mentioned, last year we did a series. We had 5 webinars as well. And it was really kind of an introduction to woodlands and woodland management, what you can do with them. And we did some case studies of how others have managed their property in the past. And it was an opportunity to kind of really orient landowners to, their woods, what they could do with them and who they connect with. So this series that we have coming up for 2020 is really trying to kind of take the next steps, hence the name. So we're getting into a little bit of higher level of the information, a little more specific type information, and we think it'll be really beneficial for a lot of our landowners that are out there. So again, this is a regional webinar series. So we've partnered with surrounding states, University of Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, and a few others that are nearby, Missouri as well. So we all have kind of similar systems and woods and stuff like that, and some of the same challenges. So we're trying to pull in this regional expertise where some of these folks have a lot of knowledge on certain topics. So we've assembled this team of presenters, and they're going to be covering the first 4 in our webinar series. Now, the final one on March 5th in the series is Kentucky specific. So we've just got Kentucky presenters and Kentucky organizations and Kentucky agencies that are going to be talking about very specific Kentucky stuff. Now, the first 4 will have content that's really regionally appropriate, but again, we think there's a lot of good content that our folks here in Kentucky will be able to benefit from.
Just because it's called Next Steps doesn't mean if they missed last year that they can't come and listen to these.
No, not at all. Yeah, so certainly if you did not come to the series last year, there's not a prerequisite that you come, that you did go to it. So you're welcome to come to these now. We do have those old ones that are available as recordings. So if somebody was really interested, they could go to the Forestry Webinars portal and they could check out the videos from last year, the webinars from last year, if they felt like they wanted to catch up. So that's an available option for folks. And they could actually catch the last one that we did, the Kentucky Forestry Assistance one, on our webpage as well. So you could just go to ukforestry.org and find our previous webinars, and you can find that. So if somebody was really wanting to kind of do a little homework, if you would, or pre-work before they came, they could watch those. But again, it's not a requirement. So we encourage folks, come out, go to a local participating office and learn about some of this information. Again, so often our woodland woodlands just don't get the attention that they deserve.
So a lot of these, like you said, are going to have other people other than Kentucky. So we decided to take another slant on this for our podcast and radio show, kind of Kentucky-based and what's going on. Tell a little bit about what the presenter might be talking about, but how it relates to Kentucky as well.
Sure.
So if we want to go over those.
So the first one on the February 6th is Woodland Management. What is right for you in your woodland? Can you talk a little bit about that one?
Sure. So a lot of times landowners don't really have that background to even know what the appropriate questions are to ask, right? So this webinar is going to really kind of try to highlight to them some of the things that they need to be thinking about. What are their objectives for their property? What are they trying to do? What are some of the things that interplay with the way your property is right now and what you want to do and what you need to do to kind of move your property in that direction. So we're going to be covering a variety of kind of scenarios, if you will. Maybe it's a cut-over property and you want to try to reforest it or something, or maybe it's a property that's barren and you need to plant it, or if it's a property that might be ready to harvest. So we're going to talk about different scenarios, and those will certainly be applicable here in Kentucky as well. So it's an opportunity to kind of learn where your property is at, what your objectives are, and then really trying to find the appropriate management practices that will help you move your property in the direction that you want to kind of achieve your goals, whether it be for wildlife or timber production or recreation or whatever. So it'll help people make those right decisions for their property is the hope.
Yes, you just mentioned what their objectives are, and how do they even know what objectives that they might even want to choose? So how do they come up with that kind of list?
Sure. And really, those are really individual. I mean, they can kind of fall into some broad categories, but when we're doing forest management here in Kentucky and really in the eastern United States, it's really all driven by the landowner's objectives, right? So the landowner tells us what they want to do with their property. And again, some of the common ones are wildlife. People like to have abundant wildlife, whether it's for photography or for hunting opportunities. Some want to try to generate revenue off of their property. That could be timber or non-timber forest products. Some may just want some privacy, in a little space, to get away from it all. Others may be looking for recreational opportunities. So when those are kind of some of the more common ones, and obviously it can be more nuanced on your own individual property, the landowner kind of picks what they want to do. And then the forester that's working with that landowner will basically evaluate their property in consideration of what they're trying to do with it. And then they try to make recommendations of practices that can be done to move that property in that direction.
So then the next one on February 13th is understanding the financial aspects of woodland management.
Yeah, certainly some folks are interested in the financial side of woodlands and woodland management. And there's a saying that money isn't everything, but money is something, know. So and we have to keep that in mind as well. And we know that our woods can generate financial returns for our owners, and we know that we can do things that can enhance that and make it better. So this is going to be talking about really when you should be making some of those decisions and how to understand the financial implications of certain management decisions, right? If you're going to choose to maybe plant, there's some financial costs that could be associated with that, so understanding those. If you're looking at maybe harvesting, what are you taking out and how does that set your property up for the future forest and stuff like that? There's trade-offs of what you leave and what you take out of the woods, so that we got to talk about that a little bit. Sometimes you need to do some management practices to kind of get you ready for a timber harvest, and there can be costs associated with that. But we can do them sometimes in ways that can kind of pay for themselves as well. And then there's also a lot of assistance available for woodland owners through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, not only in Kentucky but across the nation, that provides money to help landowners do forest conservation practices. So understanding what those are and how you can use them on your own property as you're trying to achieve your objectives is really important information. So this webinar on February 13th will be a chance for people to kind of play with those things. And a great thing about not only this webinar but all of them, we're going to have some really solid experts up there that'll be able to address a lot of questions. So, I would encourage landowners that are thinking about coming to the series to become loaded with some questions that they want related to their property, because there'll be opportunities for them to ask questions specific to their property and to their scenarios.
That's a good point, too, because because some people may think, well, it's a webinar, I can't ask any questions, and that's not the case. The person who's running the webinar, probably the county agent, will be able to talk to the person who's actually giving the webinar.
They sure can. Yeah, we have the capacity to make it really interactive. So, you can feed questions to your county agent there, and then they can get them into the system, and then presenters can kind of respond back to those questions. So it's really a good opportunity to kind of tap into a lot of expertise and pretty easily. So.
And of course, if they're Kentucky specific, we're always here to help as well.
Certainly, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is on February 20th, and it's called More Than Timber, Income Opportunities from Non-Timber Forest Products.
Right.
Can you tell about this one?
Sure. Again, a lot of times when people are thinking about their woods, one of the kind of most obvious things that comes to mind is harvesting timber, right? But there's much more to woods than just harvesting timber, and we all know that. I think actually we got we just did a show last week talking about some of these non-timber forest products, and that was maple syrup.
Right.
So that's an opportunity to harvest some of that sap off of these trees and then convert it into a product without having to cut the trees down, so they can still stay there and grow and provide other amenities and other benefits as well. But there's other examples of non-timber forest products, whether it be medicinal plants is another common one. Ginseng is one that comes to mind, but there are some others that are out there as well. There can be craft materials that can be harvested from our woods. There's food that can be harvested from our woods. There's just a variety of things that you can do, and one of the ones we do probably more commonly here in Kentucky when it comes to non-timber forest products is dealing with shiitake mushrooms. There's a lot of folks out there that do shiitake mushroom production, and there's some good demand for those mushrooms, certainly in city and urban areas, or farmers markets and other outlets. But what we can do there is we can basically do some improvement practices on our woods and then use some of that material that we basically cut down and use that as the feedstock for those mushrooms so that they can grow. So you basically can get double use out of that material. You're getting it out of the woods, so you're freeing up growing space for other trees, but you're also able to utilize that. So we're going to talk about the different kinds of options that are available for woodland owners when it comes to non-timber forest products, and just some of the things that they need to consider if they want to kind of go in those operations. Generally what I advise folks is to kind of start slow on any of these operations. I know a lot of times it can be really easy. You get excited about something and you want to go
dive right in.
Yeah, you want to jump in with both feet. But really, a lot of times, if we can just kind of take our time a little bit, and be very thoughtful and very methodological about it, we can make sure that we kind of get the outcomes that we want, really, and not kind of get the cart in front of the horse too fast.
I think that could be a very interesting webinar. Like you said, some of the landowners may have just thought, well, I've got my trees out there, that's the wood, but they're not thinking about the other opportunities that could provide in between those harvests that
Certainly,
they may do.
Yeah. And, it's a nice thing to think, too, that these can be very compatible, like I mentioned with the shiitake mushrooms, but also just being out in your woods gives you an opportunity to observe what's going on. It may give you an opportunity to scout for invasive plants or trespass issues or other things that may be going on your property. So that opportunity to get out there and engage with your property on a regular basis is good for forest management overall. It really is. So there's a lot of side benefits besides getting products out of there as well.
Right. Well, and you mentioned different landowner objectives. To one person, if you have a tree that has this big bulging thing in the middle of it, they're like, oh, I got to cut that down. But to a person who does craft things, that's like invaluable, so it just depends on what your objectives are.
A lot of times it's really in the eye of the beholder.
Correct.
And here in the United States, where private property rights are the king, right? So we just try to help these landowners do good practices, really kind of forest conservation. All of us in the forestry community really want to see healthy, vibrant woodlands, right? We feel like we benefit as a society. We feel like the individual landowner benefits. We feel like the county and the state benefits when we're taking care of our woods. And we can't really just let our woods go anymore. We've talked about that before here, but I think it serves as a general reminder for everybody. If you just let your woods go and you're not paying attention to them, there's a good chance you're not going to be satisfied with what happens. And whether it be wildfires, invasive insects, or invasive plants, or diseases, or other things that we really didn't have to contend with years ago, those are really prevalent now. So you have to kind of be vigilant. You really do if you want your woodlands to be healthy and productive in the long term. So again, these non-timber forest product or a way to kind of interact with your woods on a regular basis and make sure that you're kind of monitoring some of those issues.
So what would a healthy woodland look like?
Well, again, healthy can be a little subjective term, right? And so I think it would be healthy regard to what objectives you're trying to get. Right? So if your ideal was you're trying to get timber production, then you're going to have some really high quality growing stock that's out there of the appropriate species and stuff like that. And if you're into recreation, then your growing stock would kind of fit those needs, whether it be trees that give you good fall color or pretty spring flowers or whatever. So, the healthy is kind of in the eye of the beholder. But I think there's a few things we can all agree on what a healthy woods would have. One has the capacity to kind of sustain itself and to regenerate itself. We have enough understory regeneration and tree recruitment coming in that wood will be able to maintain itself going forward. We have an absence of invasive plants or insects or diseases that are causing issues to some of those species in there. And we're taking care of erosion and some other things in there. So those are kind of common across the board, but the makeup of the trees would vary based on your objectives, right? What you're trying to accomplish with your property.
You've been listening to From the Woods, Kentucky with co-hosts Renee and Laura. We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome to Wildlife Sounds from the Forest. This is Dr. Matt Springer. I'm an Assistant Extension Professor of Wildlife Management within the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources here at University of Kentucky. I'm here to teach you a little bit about the animals that live in our forests, especially those here in Kentucky. For those of you who might just be joining us, each week we'll play a wildlife sound from our forest. Here's our sound for this week. Stay tuned towards the end of the show. We'll talk about this animal and why it is making that sound.
Welcome back to From the Woods, Kentucky. Let's get back to our interview. Okay, so our fourth one that we have is on February 27th, and it's Launching Your Woodland Legacy Intact in Forest and in Family Ownership.
Yeah, so this is a really important topic for all of us. I have an opportunity to work with woodland owners across the state, and very much like me, we're a lot of gray hairs out there, right? So we've got people that have some age on them, on us. So we have to think about that next generation and what's happening, right? And what happens too many times is that a property will be deeded to heirs or whatever, and the heirs are not really connected to that property, to that management, of that history of what's been going on there. And there's really nobody there to kind of pick up those reins and continue on that kind of trajectory that property's on. So we miss some opportunities there. So we want to really encourage our woodland owners out there to engage their family. They're going to be the ones that are going to inherit that property. So we want to make sure that they're aware of what's going on that property, what's been done to that property, who they've worked with in the past, what programs they've been involved with, and kind of what they're trying to do. And more you can get those folks involved, those heirs to be, the better, because they're going to be invested in that property. And I think for many woodland owners, they own their property to pass it on, right? And they're trying to pass it on in an improved and in a healthy manner. And if you don't have your heirs involved with that or aware of what's going on, then that makes that handoff a little more precarious. What might happen to those woods? So being able to kind of keep that property intact and passed on and engaged with the family is really going to be the focus of this webinar. And we've got some of the folks that have done some really great work in this out of Virginia. An extension forestry group over there has done a lot of work on basically heir property and passing it on and that legacy planning and stuff like that. So we're really tapping into their expertise, and they're going to present a really great webinar on what you need to be thinking about really to keep that property in the family and together and kind of moving in that right trajectory that you're trying to do. So it's a big issue. And again, I mentioned it before, many landowners really want that property to pass on. The National Woodland Owner Survey, every time it comes out, that's one of the higher reasons that people indicate that they own woodlands is to pass it on, privacy, and keeping it in the family. We want to try to help landowners do that through this webinar.
just because it's other people doing it in a different state, that doesn't mean it wouldn't be applicable to here.
Oh, certainly. Very similar issues, right? You know, I mean, wherever you're at, there's really similar issues. And it's a struggle really not only in Kentucky, but throughout the region. So that's why we as a group wanted to put this topic on, because we felt it was really important for our woodland owners out there to kind of understand this. You know, a lot of times people don't think about that. And thinking about death is not always a pleasant thought, right? But it's a reality, right? None of us get out of here alive, and we want to make sure that that legacy of that property is kind of carried forward. And this webinar is an opportunity for landowners to really understand that and get started in that planning of making sure that that property is going to be in the family and taken care of and kind of continued on those management.
What are some of the aspects someone with property would need to be thinking about in order to get their property on that right path?
Right. Well, I think, you know, good records helps, right? Being able to share those records. But I think really, Renee, one of the most important things is to engage the family. Get them involved. Let them be part of that decision making. They're going to be the ones that are going to manage that property in the future. So having them on board with some of those management decisions, the earlier the better. Try to incorporate their objectives, what they want. The more invested they are in that property, the more likely they're going to try to keep it intact and productive and healthy. So
all right, so our the fifth and final one is on March 5th, and it's Kentucky Forestry and Wildlife Assistance, Finding the Help That You Need.
Certainly. So we're going to try to, on this last webinar on February 5th, it's really to kind of bring it all together and to connect landowners with all the agencies and organizations that are out there. And there's certainly, we've talked about some of those before. I think you got a couple of podcasts on the website talking about woodland owner resources and stuff.
Right.
But I think it's always good to mention them again. You know, we're going to have representatives from the Kentucky Division of Forestry, which is the state forestry agency that really provides primary assistance to forest landowners here in Kentucky. They can come out and meet with you on your property, develop a management plan for your property, and kind of help you do practices to move your property toward your objectives. We'll also have representatives from the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. Many folks are interested in wildlife on their property, so we'll be talking about that as well and what resources that they can help with, some of the programs that they have available. And then we'll also have the Natural Resources Conservation Service represented there as well, and they're the group that has a lot of financial resources to try to help landowners do conservation practices. So we'll have them on there, and then we're also going to have representatives from the Kentucky Tree Farm Committee and the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association. So it's an opportunity really for us to highlight to Kentucky woodland owners the primary organizations and agencies that are out there to assist them. So it's a good chance for you all to ask questions. So be thinking about questions that you have, and come to these webinars and please share them with us.
And we have to let people know that one is just Kentucky.
It is.
I know the title said it, but it's to let people know that there's no other state in that one. It's just us.
It's just us.
So if we have people that are interested, what would be their next steps?
Okay, so first you got to find the hosting county that's closest to you.
Right.
So go to our website, ukforestry.org, and there prominently at the top somewhere we'll have a link to where you can find which counties are hosting which sessions. So then we also have a link to where you can get a phone number for those offices. Please go ahead and call your county agents and let them know that you're coming so that they can plan. We're going to have some materials available for folks that attend these webinars. By pre-registering and letting agents know, that it ensures that we have enough copies available for everybody. So please find the ones that you want to go to, and then give the county office a call and let them know that you're planning to attend, so they can be prepared for you. So that'd be the first thing that they need to do. And then I also wanted to mention, and I failed to mention earlier, is that master loggers, Kentucky master loggers, are eligible to receive continuing education credit for attending 4 of these webinars. We were able to get 1.5 hours of continuing education for Kentucky master loggers for the first 3 sessions. We can't get it on the February 27th session, but we can get it on the last one, the March 5th. So really all but that February 27th session on legacy planning, we were able to get an 1.5 hour credit for master loggers. So it's a great opportunity for master loggers across the state who need some continuing education credits to get some of these credits in the evenings when they don't have to work. as well. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
And kind of explain to our listeners what is a master logger for people who, they don't need the credits, but they might be going, well, what is a master logger?
Sure. So in Kentucky, we have a bill came across, or a law basically, many years ago, around 2000, and it was really the Forest Conservation Act. And part of that was really to protect water quality. Mm-hmm. And in order to protect water quality, we want to make sure that our loggers are aware of some of the impacts that timber harvesting can have on water quality. So the Master Logger Program is a mandatory program. If you're doing commercial timber harvesting here in Kentucky, you have to have a Master Logger on site and in charge of that operation. And what the Master Logger means is that they've been through, at a minimum, a 3-day training program on the impacts of timber harvesting on water quality. Mm-hmm. It's really not a lot on like running a business or sustainable forest management or anything like that. It's really all focused on protecting water quality. So these master loggers have been trained, and they're aware of what to do to ensure that we're protecting water when we are doing timber harvesting operations. Mm-hmm. So that's a master logger, and they're required to get continuing education credits. So every 3 years they have to get at least 6 continuing education credits to stay current. So these webinars are an opportunity for them to get some of those hours right away.
Okay. And let us know, too, we done a Woodland Owner Resources episode 24, I think it was. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what they went back and listened to that, what woodland owners could hear.
Certainly. There are tremendous opportunities for woodland owners to learn more about their property, how they can go about managing it, and who can help them. So I would encourage your listeners to check out that episode and check out the webpage. We've got a lot of good links that you all have on the From the Woods webpage on that episode of some of the different resources that are available to them. You know, here at the UK Department of Forestry and Natural Resources Extension, we do a number of educational programs like this webinar series, but we also do field days and workshops and other events all the time, and so that you can find out what's coming up in your area, but we also have a lot of kind of archived resources on there as well. There's a bunch of recorded webinars, and we have a bunch of how-to videos on how to do different aspects of forest management, identifying trees. We have a bunch of publications on there. We have obviously all your From the Woods Kentucky's podcasts. Right. So there's just a bunch of different resources on there to help woodland owners kind of get the most out of their property. Mm-hmm. And again, so many people just are unaware of the resources that are available to them. So check this out, episode 24, get on the website, and you'll be able to find out a lot of information that can be really beneficial to woodland owners here in Kentucky.
And can you talk just a little bit, if we have some people that are interested in seeing these things via the webinar, but they want to get their hands on it or be out in the woods. Can you talk a little bit about your short courses that you have?
Certainly. We're in the planning stages right now for the 2020 Kentucky Woodland Owner Short Course, and that'll consist of 3 full-day sessions. We're going to have one in the East region, the Central region, and the West region of the state, and we move those around. We try to move them around every year to make them as accessible to as many people as possible, and we really try to focus on regional topics, things that are important in those different parts of the state, or what's hot at that moment, if you will. And so the field days, they are indoor and outdoor. We will start at a county extension office, and we'll also go visit a nearby farm that's been doing some woodland management practices. So it's an opportunity for woodland owners to get some indoor kind of classroom instruction, and then we go out in the field and we actually observe and kind of interact with some of these practices that are out there to kind of show landowners what they could do on their property, or at least make them aware of potential options. So I would encourage your listeners to do that, and hopefully I can come back on the show. And
sounds like another show today, right, Laura?
Once we have some more details worked out on that, and share that with your listeners. But really, it's an outstanding program. I think landowners every year, for the most part, they are just very blown away with all of the help that's available to them. It's just like a new world. It's like opening up a new lens for everybody. So I encourage folks, if they've not been, to come. And if you've come to some in the past, come again, because we kind of tweak the topics and what we're doing. We have different presenters, and we're in different areas. So there's something to be learned. And personally, I've been doing this for more than 10 years, and I can pick up something from every one of these, right? Mm-hmm. If you're listening and you're open-minded, there's an opportunity to learn some good stuff that you can actually apply on your property. So yeah, I encourage your listeners to kind of stay tuned, and hopefully, here in the next couple months, we'll have some good details on that program coming.
You mentioned one of the webinars is income opportunities. Kind of explain the economic impact of forestry in Kentucky as a whole.
Right. So it's a big deal.
Right.
It really is. And a lot of people don't realize that here in the state, we estimate over $13 billion total economic contribution.
Huge.
It really is. And one of the challenges to raise that awareness is it's very diffuse. It's spread out across the state. You know, it's not just in one location to where it's so obvious to everybody that that's what's going on. It's spread out with a lot of small family-owned businesses. You know, many of our sawmills here in the state of Kentucky are small and family-owned. We have small cabinet shops and other little entities out there doing all kinds of great work with wood, but they fly under the radar a lot. So we've been for the last 5 or 6 years now compiling the economics associated with those contributions that those industries are playing, and it is significant. We look at the employment. More than 25,000 people are directly employed in the wood industry. You expand that out to those that kind of support the wood industry, and that number grows to nearly 60,000. So that's a huge employer here in the state. It's a huge economic engine, and we have abundant forest resources here in the state. We actually have more now than we've had in a while, and they're growing, right? We are growing basically twice as much as is being removed. One of the challenges, though, is a lot of the timber harvests don't involve professional foresters, right? So we're not getting some management done on some of these timber harvests. So I think there's an opportunity. If you are thinking about timber harvesting on your property, please work with a professional forester. It'll help ensure that that property is going to be better prepared for the future and able to kind of be that future forest that you want. Otherwise, you may not be as happy with maybe the results you get.
And speak a little bit about consulting forester and how that would help you as a woodland owner.
Certainly. You know, many times landowners may be interested in selling their trees, but they don't know who would buy them. They don't know how much they're worth, right? They don't know anything about that process. And that's okay. Why would you, right? If it's something you've never engaged with, why would you be an expert at it, right? That's where consultant foresters can really come in and can really help landowners that are out there. Consultant forester can come in and let landowners know what they've got. They can give them an appraisal and estimate it on its value, but they can also help administer a timber sale for that landowner, and they can basically do the whole operation for the landowners. Now, they do work on a commission basis. It's often well worth the landowner's interest to go ahead and work with them.
So a lot of times they have the knowledge that you don't have.
That's the thing, right? They bring that knowledge, that expertise, and how to work with the other players, whether it be loggers or the buyers, the timber buyers. They can identify them. They can help evaluate them as far as their capacity to do the operation on your property. Not every logger has the same equipment or experience, so each property might present different challenges, so they can help match up appropriate loggers with that setting. So they bring a lot of expertise. They deal with the market on a regular basis, and many of the others out there in the forestry world may not deal with timber sales on a daily basis. Consultant foresters do on a much more regular basis, so they're much more aware of what's going on, what markets are local as well as more larger national and global markets as well. So they can tap into some of that knowledge and share that and really benefit the woodland owners that they work with.
Well, you've presented us with a lot of great information today. And do you have any one or two takeaway items that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I guess, call a county office that's hosting one near you and let them know that you're coming. This is a great opportunity for woodland owners and really anybody interested in kind of forest and forest management here in Kentucky to learn more information. So please come, get involved, learn. There's lots of resources and programs and events that people can attend to get more knowledge. And if you ever have any questions about forestry and forest management here in Kentucky, check out our website, ukforestry.org. Give me a call. You can reach me at 859-257-9153, and I'd be happy to talk to you about some of the opportunities we have for really forest and forest management here in the state of Kentucky.
Okay, well, give us those dates one more time.
All right, so this webinar series is going to start on February 6th, which is a Thursday evening, and it's going to run for 5 consecutive Thursday evenings all the way through March 5th. So we have different offices hosting different events, so get on our website and you can find out who's hosting which event and give those offices a call and let them know that you're going to be there. So thank you all for the opportunity to talk about this and let the woodland owners know that we got a lot of help out there for them.
Just do pay attention, though. It is Eastern time.
It is Eastern
and
time.
it's all over the state, so you really need to pay attention to that.
Indeed.
Or you might be late
Yeah.
or really early. thank you, Billy, for joining us today. We appreciate
I'm
it.
glad to be here with you all. Thank you for the great work you all are doing for Kentucky and the forestry program here in the States. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like more information on what you've heard on today's segment of today's show, visit our website at www.fromthewoodsky.org. Stay tuned now for Wildlife Sounds from the Forest. You've been listening to From the Woods, Kentucky with co-hosts Renee and Laura. We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome back to Wildlife Sounds from the Forest. I'm Dr. Matt Springer, Assistant Extension Wildlife Professor in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources. Before I tell you what that sound was you heard at the beginning of the show, let's play it again for you.
Okay, I think most people would just say, that sounds like a bird.
It does. There's not a whole lot unique about brown creeper. They're one of my favorite birds. That's because I think they're fairly easy for most people to identify, not by the way they look, because really they're just a brown bird with a light colored belly and a slightly curved beak, but they have a very distinct behavior in how they use a tree.
Okay.
So the way these guys forage is they'll land on the tree close to the base on the trunk, and they just walk up the tree. They have their feet are actually slightly outside their body, and their claws, nails are grabbing on the tree, and they kind of work up the tree side to side, and they keep going up looking for bugs in the crevices of the bark so that they can get at with their beak that's slightly curved.
Right.
They go all the way close to the top. When they get to the top, they just kind of come down and land at the next tree at the bottom and do it all over again. So they go to the top, go to the next tree, and go to the top, go to the next tree. So you can just see a brown bird that's working up a tree's trunk all the way top and goes down to the next one, and you know what it is right off the bat.
It's creeping its way up
creeping
the tree.
its way all the way to the top. Yep.
Okay.
And the brown body generally blends in with the bark of the trees.
Okay.
So that helps them because they're not a huge bird. They're very tiny. They're only about 4.5 inches in size, and they're fairly closely related to nuthatch, so they're smaller. So you're looking at a bird that not only is it small bird in height, it's a very slender bird. So it weighs about 1/4 of an ounce in total. Its wingspan's about 8 inches, so it's very skinny bird, light bird, and just works its way all the way up. I have one.
Probably be neat to watch.
It's fun for the bird nerd side of me. I enjoy it because it's a very distinct behavior for that species, and there's not many other species that have anything even close to that for us around here. And they're common. They actually don't breed here, so we get them in the winter, in the fall migration, winter, and then they leave in the spring. They go north, similar to the red-breasted nuthatch, which we talked about last week, and. So I have one every year. I see that I have a white pine in my backyard in Lexington, and every year I see it, and it's usually there and goes up my tree about every 2-3 days. I'll look out my window, and there it is going up my tree. So it's one that if you're walking in the woods, you sometimes see them as they're migrating through, going up. And these guys are in the spring, summer, when they're in their breeding range, are looking more for the conifers. Here they'll just pick any tree. They're looking for forested land, so they'll be able to look for food in both conifers and hardwoods.
Okay. Do they nest, I'm assuming?
They do nest, yes, like most birds.
Right.
They have a nest. These guys, when they're nesting in the north, they are looking for live trees that have dead or dying trees close by for a food source, and they usually are picking limbs that are either alive and next to a dead limb, or actually the limb is dying as they're picking it. It's kind of an oddity for them. And they also, like the other nuthatches that we talked about, have one brood a year, about 5 to 6 eggs, relatively quick incubation time, about 2 weeks. And then those birds are out as soon as potentially 2 weeks because they're so small.
Okay.
So yeah.
Most birds, do they like cover, or is it just some birds are that way and some aren't?
So that would be species-specific term.
Okay.
Cover is a very species-specific term. It's all relative.
Okay.
So these guys will use open forests, mature forests. You think about it, if they're a bird that flies to the base of a tree and feeds all the way up a tree, they're going to be looking for a bigger tree because it gives them more surface area to look for. Those bigger trees don't tend to be in areas with very thick brush,
Right.
so not so much.
Not so much.
Yeah, they rely a lot more on camouflage, and they're so tiny that they're rather agile as well. So
since they don't nest here, they're basically putting out a bird box isn't going to help for them.
no, it's not like the way
Some other bird will take over that spot.
well, something will find it,
Right.
right? But the brown creeper will not be it.
Okay.
Yeah, the white-breasted nuthatch that we talked about with putting out bird houses for that. This one is not one that'll work here.
All right.
Yeah, it's a winter resident.
All right. Well, thanks for coming and talking about it.
No problem.
Thank you for joining us today. If you'd like more information on what you've heard on this segment of today's show, visit our website at www.fromthewoodsky.org.
Hey there. If you're enjoying this podcast from WRFL Lexington, you may enjoy our live radio stream at WRFL.FM and, of course, via radio at 88.1 FM in the Central Kentucky area. We have a wide variety of programs you're sure to enjoy. Just go to WRFL.FM/schedule and see what programs appeal most to you. Thanks again for listening to this podcast from WRFL Lexington.